Welcome to today's webinar on sustainable procurement for high-performance buildings, Cradle Certified products in US federal purchasing. My name is Christina Raab, and I'm the Vice President for Strategy and Development at the Cradle Products Innovation Institute. I will be your host for the webinar today. I'm truly delighted to be joined by three renowned speakers and experts for a session on sustainable public procurement that promises to be timely, highly relevant, and very practical. Our speakers today are Alison Kinn Bennett, Senior Advisor of the US Environmental Protection Agency, Michael Bloom, High Performance Buildings Program Advisor at US General Services Administration, and Paul Shahriari, Founder and Chief Innovation Officer at the ecomedes. Why have we decided to organize a webinar focused on the US federal purchasing practices? The US federal government is one of the largest institutional buyers in the world, and a vast market opportunity exists for companies that meet the procurement requirements and are able to supply products that are more sustainable. At the Institute, we work towards a world where materials and products are designed and manufactured to have a positive impact on people and planet. We achieve this vision by setting a science-based standard with a verified assessment that serves a global measure for materials and products that are safe, circular, and responsibly made. This standard is being applied across many product categories, including building and cleaning products. The recognition of certifications such as Cradle Certified in private procurement, but also public purchasing schemes, is a most powerful mechanism to drive market transformation at large for a positive future. In today's webinar, we will learn from Alison about the EPA's environmentally preferable purchasing program, and then hear from Michael and Paul about the Sustainable Facilities tool and its newest Data Enrichment program. If you have any questions throughout the presentation and the demonstration, please submit them to us in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. We will answer them either in writing during the webinar or live at the end of the session. And without further ado, it is now my great pleasure to hand over to you, Alison.
Great, thanks so much for having me, Christina. Our environmentally preferable purchasing program at EPA has a simple goal of helping the US federal government buy more sustainable products and services with the intention that others can follow our lead and learn and grow from the mistakes we've made as well. And there's, I think our program was way ahead of its time in the approach we've taken. First, looking to the private sector to learn from the innovations in the standards development community. Second, taking a multi-attribute approach to how we define what is a more sustainable product. And third, really, again, leveraging the power of the US federal government purchasing power. It's really been fun to see over the 20 years that I've been involved in this program that sustainable public procurement has become an international movement. Our little team has helped to launch the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council here in North America, and I'm engaged in the Sustainable Public Procurement program of the One Planet Network, which takes lessons learned and is a great network of countries across the world that are trying to implement more sustainable public procurement. So I guess before I explain why and how we do what we do, let me cut to the chase and share that we are recommending the Cradle to Cradle certification is one of a handful of first choice eco labels in a number of building product categories for the federal government, which means that EPA found Cradle to Cradle to address all the significant environmental hotspots across the life cycle, and that it has a competent certification program. So now let me tell you how we did this. me see if this works to the next slide. Just a moment. Great. So we draw on and weave together multiple authorities to take this multifaceted approach in the environmentally preferable purchasing program. In addition to requirements in the federal government to purchase bio-preferred and recycled content through our comprehensive procurement guidelines, Energy Star and FEMP, and SNAP for ozone depleting substances, the federal acquisition regulation directs federal agencies to maximize the utilization of environmentally preferable products based upon EPA issued guidance. And so going back to the early 1990s with the Pollution Prevention Act, we've been leveraging federal purchasing power to drive source reduction. And there was also great wisdom in the National Technology Transfer and Advancement Act and Office of Management and Budget Circular A119, which directs the federal government to participate in private sector standards development and to use private sector standards and conformity assessment in procurement. So we're very much leaning on those, the wisdom in those laws as we move forward and looking to the private sector for innovation and defining what is sustainable. In addition, there has been a history and a tradition of presidents since the early 90s issuing executive orders. And most recently in Executive Order 13834, federal agencies are directed to use EPA's recommendations of specification standards and eco-labels as a resource to help them meet their sustainable acquisition goals and mandates. So our strategic focus, again, is private sector standards and leveraging federal purchasing. And we do this with 5 key approaches. We engage in and participate in standards development. I've helped to coordinate federal agency comments on the Cradle to Cradle standard. We have great and deep expertise in the Department of State and the Department of Labor, not just EPA, that can help influence supply chain sustainability performance. What I'll mostly be talking about today is how we assess and recommend specification standards and eco-labels to the federal government. My colleagues, Michael and Paul, will talk about how our recommendations are implemented in federal procurement. And so how do we assist federal buyers of moving from having the list of standards and eco-labels to actually buying the products and services that meet those standards and eco-labels. And we help small businesses navigate this very confusing federal marketplace. And finally, we do our best to try to quantify the benefits of buying more sustainable products and services. For example, we launched the environmental benefits, electronics environmental benefits calculator that is now spun off and is managed by the Green Electronics Council that has allowed us to measure the benefits of federal procurement of EPEAT registered products. Great. So obviously why we do this, the federal government has an enormous footprint and thus a great responsibility to reduce our footprint. And we know that what we asked for through our procurement signals to the marketplace gets built and is not only affecting our own supply chain and footprints, but thus of all consumers of those same goods and services, not only in the US, but around the world. I think this group understands this why private sector standards better than many that I speak with. But again, I think there was great wisdom in the federal law that directs federal agencies to look to the private sector versus coming up with government unique standards. We're really good at these deep dive single attribute approaches in our Energy Star program, recovered content. But the success of private sector standards and weaving these often overlapping issues together in a sustainability, holistic, multi-attribute approach has been really fun to be a part of and to fold into federal approaches. You know, I've never worked on EPA's regulatory side, but this collaborative approach that we find through voluntary consensus standards has taught us a lot through other programs that we manage at the federal government that affect environmental protection. And I think industry sees these private sector standards as helping to sort through the noise about what should I do in my facility and my supply chain that will get recognized by the marketplace. So I think you understand that the success of these standards and eco-labels and moving the market has, interestingly, as they become the easy buttons for sustainability. And yet the challenge we've found ourselves in is that it's been very difficult for purchasers that are not environmental and sustainability experts to sort through the noise and to understand which are truthful and which are effective and which will help them meet their sustainability goals. So with 460 and counting standards and eco-labels in the sustainability marketplace, with many different approaches being taken, some of these are pass-fail, some are multi-attribute, some are single attribute, some of them are backed by a robust and competent certification program. Some are not. Some are developed through multi-stakeholder consensus processes, some are not. And so the federal government needed to understand this marketplace. And so we, through public comment and stakeholder feedback and listening sessions, we got a pretty clear signal about 6 or 7 years ago that for better or for worse, EPA was probably well positioned to help sort through this noise. And so the process we took looked a little bit like this. This is an oversimplification of 8 years of blood, sweat, and tears and hundreds of stakeholders' engagement. We basically asked for volunteers to get engaged in helping us develop a set of guidelines, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. And the goal being to kind of reduce this purchaser paralyzation of being able to sort through this information overload. We relied on where there had been success in federal agencies to date in using private sector standards and eco-labels. DOE, our Department of Energy, and General Services Administration, Public Building Service have had a long history. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We adopted where they had been successfully using standards and eco-labels. But where there were some gaps in product categories, or there was an opportunity to reflect new standards in the marketplace, we have done an assessment based on our guidelines. So what are these guidelines? So our criteria that we use to assess standards and eco-labels was developed over a number of years through federal interagency and public comment and listening sessions with key sectors. And we landed on these 4 sections that have 80 or so criteria, and we tested them in a 2-year pilot project in 2015 and 2016 in a number of building product categories. The guidelines address for section 1, is the criteria developed in an open, transparent process per the federal government's definition of a voluntary consensus standard? Federal agencies are allowed to use other types of private sector standards as well, but federal agencies need to understand if it's a voluntary consensus standard. Section 2 of our guidelines, really where EPA has the most expertise, is it effective in addressing the key issues or hotspots for the product or service category in a measurable way? Section 3, is there a competent and robust and credible certification program to back it up? And section 4, the governance really of the eco-label, does it convey accurate information? Is it being used appropriately in the market? So these are the categories in which we provide recommendations of private sector standards and eco-labels. The asterisk categories are those that were a part of our pilot, and we are interested if there are suggestions for how we might expand and or update. We're always interested in hearing that from the marketplace. And ta-da, here are the recommended standards and eco-labels. I do want to point out that there are federal programs in addition to the private sector standards and eco-labels we're recommending here. And in addition, we recommend specifications to fill key gaps. So rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if a standard does a lot of stuff really well, but maybe it's missing, for example, in some of the furniture specifications, we have added a specification for the federal government to consider the flame retardant transparency requirements out of California, and some indoor air quality emissions requirements consistent with the California Department of Public Health. This is where maybe the multi-attribute private sector standards were addressing these issues as a optional criterion. And we want to make sure that the products we're buying in the federal government address these key hotspots as well. So our recommendations of specifications, standards, and eco-labels for federal purchasers. I'll turn it over to Michael and Paul to demonstrate how we're implementing this in the federal government.
Thanks, Allison. So I'm Michael Bloom with GSA's Office of Federal High Performance Buildings, and I manage the Sustainable Facilities Tool, which we call SFTool.gov, which is quite literally the bridge, technologically speaking, between the EPA's excellent work that Allison just presented and the Data Enrichment project that Paul will speak about in a moment. SFTool was created to help anyone understand and begin to make sustainable decisions. And novices and experts alike benefit from resources that you can find there, like materials comparisons or the cost-effective upgrades wizard, our newly revamped life cycle thinking pages, and of course the GPC, which means the Green Procurement Compilation, which is essentially where we talk about all of the category rules that Allison just presented. More on that in a moment. So if you haven't visited SFTool, or even if you have, we welcome you back. Just this morning, the page that you see now presented changed a bit in terms of appearance when our site went live with a new look and updated features, including something I think may very much interest to you, which is the Total Workplace Scorecard. The Total Workplace Scorecard actually helps any workplace or building managers benchmark and measure the quality improvements between existing and new workplace conditions. And what it does that we've never really done before is go beyond energy and water efficiency and really talk about health in a deep and meaningful way. So the scorecard is open for anyone to use, just like sftool.gov. Anybody can use it, no logins. And that scorecard fully integrates health, comfort, and performance considerations into traditional workplace engagements. So we're talking a lot about the why do sustainability and how to do sustainability, not just the, and mostly from a building perspective when we started. My office built the site to help federal agencies implement sustainable facility strategies in projects of all sizes. We were doing huge projects really, really well. Oftentimes they were certified projects with LEED or Green Globes, but we weren't doing our small projects with the same amount of attention to that detail. So what we did is we assembled a team of sustainability experts with very significant technology chops, which is really important. If you're going to find a solution to doing this well, you need to come from a point of subject matter knowledge and then put the technology around it. Because our task wasn't about just crunching big data, it was about demystifying the world of sustainable buildings and implementing energy and water efficient solutions that were also good for people's health. So most critically, it's about knowing what information is most important to the people who are going to do this work and then delivering it to them. Now, we quickly realized that our plain English approach to implementing sustainable practices could also be a perfect platform for the Green Procurement Compilation, which back in 2012 was an Excel spreadsheet living on a few people's computers in the federal government that tracked which product categories were covered by which federal environmental programs like Energy Star, WaterSense, BioPreferred, CPG, or Safer Choice. And we added services later, but we created a page under Procure in SFTool that included all these details. And also additional details about EPA's recommended specifications, standards, and eco-labels when those were published, including C2C. But what we were missing was product level information. We were able to give people category specific information, but not products. And I started my career as a project manager, and I still remember how long it took me to get from the rules I was supposed to follow to the actual list of things that I could buy in order to renovate a building. So here we enter our partnership with Ecomedes and Paul Shahriari, who's our next presenter, to create SFTool product search. We'll go to the next page. And it's all yours, Paul.
Thank you, Michael. So what we did is we followed the great work that Alison had worked on and grabbed all these amazing eco-labels, both the ones that are inside the federal government and also the third-party eco-labels and certifications and the recommendations. And what we wanted to do is bring that technical list that Michael would have loved to have had when he was a project manager, and I certainly would have loved to have 10 years ago when I was doing a lot of this consulting work as well, is put it all together and basically do three things with the data. We first collect it, we then curate it, and then we cultivate it into a list that is compliant with those SFTool product category rules that are in the GPC. So we've created the largest curated compliant database covering about 15 mega product categories, and there's about 150 subcategories within that list, about 4,500 brands, 20 eco-labels and certification bodies, and includes about 150,000 products that are constantly being updated, because what we learned managing this data is that this data is coming in from multiple sources, and every one of these certification bodies is updating their lists and their registries, if not on a weekly basis, certainly on a monthly basis. So all this information is pulsed in and out of the database seamlessly, so federal buyers don't have to constantly go out on a scavenger hunt to go look for it. If you go to the SFTool product search, you can actually look at all the different product categories that are also mapped to CEC requirements. And there's quite a few. Under building finishes, things like flooring, paints, acoustical ceiling tiles, all reference the C2C as one of the eco-labels that's recommended to look at. Building furnishings has furniture, construction materials has drywall, insulation, structural fiberboard, and panels. And under miscellaneous, there's also the adhesives category. So each one of these product categories has a specific rule. And the element that we worked on to connect the two dots was in the SFTool, there's a rule for carpet. There's the procurement guidelines that have been put together by Alison's team at the EPA. There's federal programs listed here up at the top, and then all these other eco-labels. And a normal person before this tool has been launched would have had to go to every one of those individual registries, go hunt down the products, go into the subcategories on all those different registries. And what Michael Bloom had tasked us with is, well, what could we do to make this a lot more easy, a lot more straightforward, a lot more streamlined? So at the top of any category that's enabled on SFTool product search, you'll see these binoculars in this green bar. If you were to click on that binocular, you'll be then sent to the platform SFTool product search, and it's already pre-curated down to the carpet. And again, you can see all the eco-labels that are providing data to the carpet category, and C2C there is at the top. It's also at the top of this list as a multi-attribute level category. So there's a lot of different eco-labels, and as Alison said, some made the cut, some didn't even make the cut onto this list, but then there are actually hierarchy in terms of which ones are multi-attribute, which ones are single attribute, and C2C is a multi-attribute standard. So everything that is in the C2C registry is being data synchronized and is in our tool so that the federal buyer can see it very, very quickly, and they can sort then by brand or other subcategory requirements that they might be looking for. And floor coverings, it's the same thing, a slightly different set of category rules, floor score instead of say CRI green label, but then the C2C is also included. So all that entire catalog again is synchronized from the current database that you have registry data from on C2C is immediately provided to the federal buyer so they can see that information very, very quickly. Furniture, the same thing. And then also building insulation. So it just shows you how you can jump from one platform at sftool.gov directly into SFTool product search. And that's what I'm going to jump into now as a live demo to show you how that platform works and aligns that kind of data across the multitude of categories that C2C has made its way into in terms of regulations and specifications. So I'll go to a live demo. Any one of you guys that wants to play along can just go to sftool.ecomedes.com and be able to access the data point right there. I'll open up my slides and go right in here. So this is the new face of sftool.gov that's just got updated this morning. So it's really, really cool, very well organized. I think out of all the tools out there I see by public sector and private sector procurement teams, this has got to be the most well organized document there is. If you click on the Procure tab at the top, you'll be then taken to this green procurement compilation that I just showed you. And I'll dive into an example here. So if I was looking at building furnishings and I clicked on the category of furniture, then here are all those rules I just talked about: CPG, bio preferred, BIFMA level, C2C, All the rest are right here listed. So instead of having to go to every one of these registries, the binoculars will open up another browser window and take you right into the 22,000 products that are aligned with the furniture guidelines. And you'll see here, there's federal guidelines, and then there's these third-party eco-labels. All of these eco-labels provide that data to us digitally. And the federal buyer, if they're looking for C2C, would be able to find all the products that have C2C, and there's 81 results. And all these brands have at least one product that meets the C2C guidelines available to the user. It allows the person to find the data. They can also just click on any of the products and find access to all the information that they might need. And what's nice is we also have hyperlinks back to the certification body. So in this case, the silver certification for this chair is available to the user of SFTool. With one click, they go right back. This is actually coming directly from the C2C registry live, so that Herman Miller document can come through there. Another nice feature of this tool is that we not only just gather one eco-label, but any of the eco-labels that have done a great job of having a good registry and able to have that content allows that data to be visible and usable by somebody instantly without them having to be an expert on procurement or even really know what all these eco-labels mean. There's a lot of cognitive load when you're going out to try to do a green project. And we want to overcome that with simplicity the most we can. Another cool feature is that when you're going in to the data set, you can actually go and do project level documentation. So in here, you can actually build an entire project worth of data and have all the products that meet those guidelines evaluated against the federal guidelines. So you can combine projects and create really nice sets of procurement documents. Comparison is also very easy to do. In our tool, we actually can do side-by-side comparisons of what manufacturers have provided. In this case, 3 of these 4 compared flooring products have a C2C certificate, and many other elements of data is also included, so the user can look at things side by side and make an average assumption. If the tool doesn't have a product that's C2C, they can take that out of the certification and refer that on the next sign out. Another way to do that is to do multitudes of products. A lot of projects are kind of looking at multiple opportunities with different brands. Here, this provides you your best foot forward to be able to have all that data available to a project team and have, again, those levels of certification and cradle-to-cradle certificates are all available to the user without any scavenger hunt needing to be done. Another nice feature is that in any of the categories that feature C2C, you can actually just search by C2C as a left-hand filter and then navigate to all the different product categories and see all the brands that meet those guidelines. So when a user is looking specifically for a procurement guideline, as in the SFTool, they can actually search all the different brands and do a very quick read on whether or not that brand that they're talking to or getting bids from are going to be able to meet the documentation. And if they were looking for the documentation for this product, they can just document those guidelines against the actual SFTool credit hierarchy. And here would be the federal guidelines being noted as compliant. And the user can then download that PDF, and that'll show up on their desktop with a couple of clicks. So in a couple of seconds, we've automated most of the work that would take the better part of a couple of hours to go gather on either one website, or if they had to go to all these multitude of websites to go grab all this environmental data, all this data is summarized for the user. It's also date stamped on the SFTool product letterhead. So that way the buyer or the seller both know that this product is going to be compliant for their project. And with that, I'll go back to my last 2 slides. So the benefit to institutional buyers we find is that they want to be able to very quickly get their teams to be able to find products that meet the guidelines. If they've done the hard work of establishing ESG, SDG, LEED guidelines, or federal procurement guidelines, they want to be able to find those products very, very quickly and save that extra time. So if we do that first part right, which we've delivered with SFTool, and then we provide that tool out to the project teams and also the distribution and sales teams, they can streamline that documentation reporting, make it easier to either buy the sustainable products if you're the buyer, but also avail that same technology to the seller so they can use that product platform. And ultimately, we believe that's going to help improve the building performance out there. There's so many buildings that the federal government occupies. Over 500 million square feet is occupied by federal agencies. And if every time they buy something for those buildings, they come off of the SFTool platform, they're going to be able to make those buildings better and better with every single dollar spent. Alison touched base on how the federal government is the largest buyer of single attribute elements and multi-attribute sustainability in the country. They also have a huge amount of influence on what the rest of the market sees. So if Energy Star monitors what the federal government buys, a lot of other private sector companies will also be looking for those Energy Star monitors to not only lower energy, but also carbon impacts as well. And the last slide I'm just going to cover briefly is that the data enrichment program is a way for you guys to take a look at the data that we have in the platform already for you through your great partnership with C2C and add additional information, product images, descriptions, hyperlink back to your product's brand page, contact information for your federal sales channel representative. So when someone's on SFTool looking at your product data, we want to be able to connect that person that's on the buy side to whoever you'd like them to talk to, whether it's a distributor or some other sales channel that you would like them to connect with. We'd love to have that data to further support the buyer side of this equation. We'd also love to know if there's any SKU level data or product identification data, because more and more institutional buyers are leaning on more e-commerce and more digital catalogs of data. So the more that we could add to your product listing on SFTool, the more beneficial that'll be in the future as more and more buyers shift to that element. And it's very easy to start the process. You guys can send me an email or register on Calendly for a meeting. We do a one-on-one review of all your data. We can provide it to you so you guys can see it in a simple spreadsheet. And then we can enrich the data with the other additional information you'd like to add. And then within 5 business days, we'll be able to update that data and put it back onto SFTool. So anybody that's on that platform will be able to see it, use it, and further engage your brand with more engaged sales activity. So with that, I'll end and open it up for any questions.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Paul, for this very practical demonstration, and also Michael, Alison, really setting a great context there of some best practice that's being pursued by the federal government. And we have several questions received, which we will answer live. And there's also the opportunity to still pose additional questions. So if the participants' audiences would like to know more, have a particular question, please feed them into the question and answer box. And before I go into the question, maybe I'll read out one phrase that was put into the chat box, and it's saying this website is so much easier to use now. I think that was put in while Paul was presenting. Thank you so much. I can already see it being beneficial for the private sector. So that was a live comment that we received throughout the presentation. I start with a question that we have received for Alison. And the question is, can you speak to how the current product procurement standards implemented by the EPA correlate to the various comprehensive procurement guidelines that you have in place?
Sure, thank you. Yes, so when Congress conceived of the comprehensive procurement guidelines back in 1976, it must have seemed like it was a comprehensive procurement guideline. However, EPA manages this program, and it is solely focused on recovered content, recycled content. This is a statutorily mandated program for federal agencies to follow, where EPA establishes recommended recycled content levels by product category. That program has recently put out a call for public comment to update and or reconsider certain approaches that the program is taking on recovered content. My program looks to those, but again, we are multi-attribute and we look to private sector standards. So in my role of engaging in Cradle to Cradle and NSF International and Underwriters Laboratory and other voluntary consensus standards in the private sector, when the topic of what percentage of recycled content should be given credit in these standards, I often turn to my colleagues that manage the comprehensive procurement guidelines and see, well, what is the federal government required to do? Does that still make sense in the market today, given potential competing trade-offs amongst environmental attributes across the life cycle? So I hope that clarifies the distinction. One's a federal government program focused on a single attribute. Our program looks at private sector standards and is a multi-attribute.
Great, thank you, Alison. We have a question here for Michael. As many organizations are signaling that they will not be returning to traditional office arrangements post-pandemic, are you considering additions to SFTool to help make home offices more sustainable?
Excellent question. And I've worked from a home office for the last 10 years for my agency, and I've always thought that we needed to create a way for people to make wise decisions about not only energy and water, which are thought about at the aggregate level and make a big difference in workplaces, but healthy spaces at home, inclusive of ergonomics and the amount of light you get, et cetera. And you can currently find that kind of information on SFTool in the health and buildings section. And I would direct you there for answers to what you can do at home to make that space work better for you. It is much less material centric than the green procurement compilation and the purchasing oriented kind of stuff we're talking about today, but it is nevertheless really relevant. I also think that when you are purchasing something, carpet's a great example, adhesive, paint, and you want to be sensitive to the kinds of things that will change your environment, that the same rules and the same standards that you see in the GPC and in SFTool product search can apply to your home projects. It may be overkill, but to put such a big tool, but the truth is it's easy to use. So it's totally usable if you're doing a renovation at the small project level, like we talked about. We need to be able to do these things on the billions of dollars of small projects the federal government does each year, as well as the kind of small projects we do at home.
Thank you, Michael. Paul, we have some practical question for you that has been raised a few times here. So the question, if product manufacturers would be want to be part of this platform, what is the process? I mean, you mentioned a little bit to that, also of course through the certifications, but is there a cost involved in that for the product manufacturers to be in the SFTool? And if so, how does it work?
Yeah, so it doesn't cost anything to be an SFTool. The ticket of entry is being listed on one of the eco labels that Alison has put together and the GPC has listed as an SFTool requirement. So we get the data for certification bodies directly from those certification bodies. That way it's legitimate data. It's not, a manufacturer making that data up. And the participation in the Data Enrichment program is also free. So the 4 elements of data that the manufacturers can update with us are product images, descriptions, hyperlinks, all that stuff can be provided to us. And Michael Bloom is invested in that work on their behalf. So we have a contract with Michael. We've built a portal basically that you guys send us your information. We'll give you a simple spreadsheet with all your data already in it. You add a couple more columns of data that you're willing to share with the federal buyer. We upload it, and there's no cost at all for them to be participating in the SFTool product search. We have other things that we do for manufacturers, but this program is all about just providing the data that the federal buyer might need so they can better connect with their product leads. Mm-hmm. My email is just paul@ecomedes.com. And if you send me an email after the call, I'll be happy to set up a half hour, 1 hour discussion about your data. And we'll go into one-on-one on where your data is, how it's organized, and then how we can make it better.
Great, thank you. Alison, there's a question for you I would like to raise. We have, of course, a very international community here, also from different countries, also outside of the US. And the question is a little bit, how can governments basically work together to learn from each other about these best practices and to really accelerate also the sustainable public procurement movement you have been speaking about at the beginning of your presentation. So could you share a little bit how you're also really spreading these best practices or maybe coordinating also with other international governments on your approaches?
Sure. So the United Nations has, as part of its One Planet Network, formerly UNEP, the One Planet Network has a sustainable public procurement program in which a number of federal level, national level governments are engaged, and there are reporting of success stories and sharing of tools on that platform, as well as webinars. And the current effort underway is a reporting exercise to capture how well are we doing on the Sustainable Development Goal related to sustainable public procurement, 12.7.1, under the Sustainable Consumption and Production goals. And so we should very soon have a very nice picture of how the world is doing in meeting our goals of having 100% sustainable public procurement. I would direct you to my colleague at UNEP, Fareed Yaker. I'm happy to connect anyone on the call with that effort after.
Thank you, Alison. We have another practical question maybe for Paul. The question is, so if product manufacturers see anything on this platform that might not be fully updated, or where more additional information is available, what would be the process of doing that, and who should be informed?
Yeah, so they could just send us an email, and like I said, we'll give them, if they want to participate in this program, we'll give them their data, and they can update their data on their end, and then we can upload the data. If it's related to C2C or one of their certifications, they're going to have to go through the certification body. We don't edit and augment any related data to certifications. That all comes directly from, obviously, the certification body. We date stamp and also source stamp all the data. But if it's related to something like, recycled content or something like that, then they're able to make that change in the document that we'll share with them, and they can upload it to us, and we'll give it consideration and upload it in the next 5 business days in a batch.
Mm-hmm. Great. Then Michael, a question for you centered around maybe capacity building and training. So some, of course, were following this very strongly here. The demonstration, it was quite fastly done. So if people would like to learn more about it, have tutorials around the SFTool, so which trainings or capacity building do you have available, let's say for product manufacturers? And the other question is, how do you also train inside your organizations, the federal buyers? Because, for example, in our experience at the Institute, one key is always in the private companies to really have the sourcing and the procurement departments on board. Often we start with sustainability departments or design departments, and that a lot of training is often required. So how are you handling that on a federal level?
Great. So two different parts to this. So the federal training, I do a lot of it myself when asked, and I am happy to do sftool.gov tutorials, including the SFTool product search for organizations. You can reach me at michael.bloom@gsa.gov. And I think we have our addresses elsewhere. When it comes to the 2 tools, we've increasingly asked for organizations to point contractors and potential manufacturers to the tool so they can use it as part of our as part of our contract agreements. For instance, if we want people to use compliant products, we will point them to the GPC in our actual documents. The White House's Council for Environmental Quality, which is the sustainability at that executive level, also is increasingly pointing to SFTool as a resource. The challenge, though, is once you get there, I like to think that SFTool is pretty easy to use and figure out, but it's not always that way for everybody. So here, thank you, Paul, by the way. If you look at that, where do you start? Right below the picture there, it actually gives you user guides for whether you're a procurement professional or a facility manager or leasing specialist. And if you click on like that green one for procurement professional, it'll walk you through the tool based on the things that we think you'd want to do with a tool like ours. And as you look at the list on the left-hand side, it actually takes you to a picture of the page we're sending you to on the right-hand side. So there's interactive tutorials built into SFTool. The same is actually true on SFTool product search. At the top of the SFTool product search page, there's something that says support, and it walks you through step by step with pictures, what we understandably did really, really quickly today to show you the depth. And as you click on any of those categories, from creating an account to comparing materials, it will show you how to do each one of those steps much slower than we did today, just by clicking on the support button at the top right. So yes, we'll do classes for people. We try to build in support to the actual tool. And then also on SFTool, if Paul, you don't mind going back there again, there's actually resources in the tool called at the bottom left of the homepage that are basically saying teach SFTool, right above there, the white box. And that's a new page that actually features for any of you who want to say, hey, I found this great tool. And if you click that, Paul, it'll take you to something else. I found this new tool. I want to share it with other people. This has a 2-minute introduction video. It has a flyer, a 2-pager. It has a briefing document that's designed for you or anybody to say, here are the parts of SFTool I'd like to share with folks. And it goes down deep into detail. And soon that topics category on the far right will be populated with 1-pagers about each one of the SFTool components. So we're trying to make it easy for people who are excited to share on our behalf the fact that SFTool's there too. All of these things, again, are open for you to use with your folks wherever you are in the world.
Thank you, Michael. Paul, we have another question for you. How can a manufacturer get their product GSA approved? Do they need to be, or maybe it's a question for Michael also, do they need to be on the GSA schedule in order to be listed on the SFTool? Maybe Michael or Paul, whoever wants to answer that.
So no, they don't need to be on GSA schedule to appear in the tool, but Paul previously explained how products end up in the tool, and I'll let Paul reiterate that.
Yeah, so if you see under carpet, here are the rules. Here's all the required data that you need to have. So the basic way to get on the SFTool product search is they have to have one of these data points met. Either they're biopreferred, they have CPG, they're cradle to cradle, they're NSF 140, they have a living future designation or declare label or indoor advantage. So these are the ways. This is kind of like the gating. And when a user clicks on carpet, every single product that is a carpet that meets either the federal or these third-party eco-label standards will then be available in this gigantic long brand list and be one of the 18,000 results that are available to the federal buyer. So there's no way to just get yourself on here unless you've met one or more of those eco-label standards that are listed on that product page. And that's what we can walk any of the manufacturers that are on the call today. Please give us a call. We'll be happy to show you how to do it. Another way to do it is just go to the main SFTool product search and just type in the name of your company. So if it was, say, Interface, I could just type in Interface. You'll see the brand name pop up and every product that they have. And then immediately you'll see the eco labels associated with this brand that have provided a pathway to get onto the GSA product search. That's another way to do it. But we're happy to get on a phone call with anybody that wants to dive deeper into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for the clarifications. And I have one final question here that is for Alison. And the question is related to the different labels that you recommend, and how does the EPA make a differentiation between these different levels and these different labels? You have explained, of course, the assessment and the selection process, but how do you help make understandable also differences between the labels that you recommend?
Yeah, and I see the specific question here in the Q&A. Yeah, I think a resource I would very much like to build is to show how these things are interoperable, where the cradle to cradle criteria on indoor air quality is similar to or how it's different from Green Guard. In the absence of that, what we have available is the individual sort of scorecards of the criteria that we used and the responses and how we came to a determination of yes or no for each standard and eco label we're recommending. And we can make those available by request. The other thing that our whole effort has, I think, galvanized is we're beginning to see eco label organizations and standards development organizations working together more often. They say, hey, we're both being used by the federal government. Maybe we can find some ways to mutually recognize each other. Maybe we're have some duplications of efforts, and it's not all about competition here. Maybe there's ways we can learn from each other as eco labels in the marketplace and spread our reach by working together. And so we've really been heartened to see some of that happening as well in the space. And so I'm happy to kind of dive down and answer any more specific sort of research questions. Feel free to follow up with me on some of those more detailed analyses.
Thank you, Alison. And yeah, I can also only stress at the Cradle Products Innovation Institute, we also make a lot of effort on mutual recognition with other, like-minded programs, with other like-minded standards to really make it easier, for those who apply it, be it in manufacturing or be it in procurement. To be able to navigate the scene. Of course, also we are very much on the forefront of eco labels, and our standard definitively is a leadership standard that we are continuously also developing very soon. The version 4 of our Cradle Certified will also come out in the spring of 2021, and with that we really aim very strongly to set, of course, the standards on a very comprehensive and holistic label for any kind of procurement, be it private or public. Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted about the participation today. Thank you so much also for your very valuable questions. If we go to the last slide of the presentation, you will see some of the valuable links as well that you can read even more further about, and you see it, of course, throughout the presentation also. And we will make the webinar available to all registered participants, and it will also be available as of tomorrow on the Institute website. And of course, if you have any further questions, please be invited to get in touch with us at any time. And I would really like to thank Alison and Michael and Paul again for the valuable information shared today, also for the passion shared. I think it's very clear that you take a very strong sustainability leadership within your organizations. Thank you very much for that. We also feel that the public procurement can be such an enabling environment to really accelerate the much needed industry transformation. And thanks again, for your leadership there and for being with us on the webinar today. Thanks to all the participants. And we look forward to seeing you at one of our future webinars and wish you all the best for now, and goodbye.